Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, wherever you are. I know we have people from different parts of the world, Canada, United States. I'm in Canada at the moment in Toronto. We have people from Africa, we have people from Asia, we have people from Australia. So for you, it might already be good afternoon. So thanks so much for joining us. And thanks for filling out that poll. Now, please let me know in the chat box if you can hear and see me well. You can find a button for a chat, and that will also tell me that the chat functionality is working. And I know the poll is working, so we should all be good to go. Okay, perfect, wonderful. So let me go ahead and end the poll right now. Okay, awesome, yes. Yes, perfect. I see a lot of yeses. So you might be wondering, ladies and gentlemen, well, for whom is this class? Is this class really for me? And this class is really designed to give you a taste of what studying for the GMAT looks like, give you a taste of some of the strategies, and also help you get a better understanding of what this exam is really all about. Because it's a bit of a different beast compared to most of the other exams that you may have ever taken. So the way that we prepare for this test might also be very different. And if you want to set yourself up for success, then you definitely would want to understand this test a little bit more. My name is Sergey. I'm a president of a company called AdmitMaster. We are official partners of the GMAT, the organization that makes the test. So I will share with you everything that I can within these 2 hours based on my 15 years of experience and based on our experience working with literally tens of thousands of people who came through AdmitMaster over these years, as well as our experience working with people like the GMAT, who share with us how the exam really works and the algorithm of the exam and many, many other things. Many of them I will be able to share with you today. So here's our agenda for today. Here's what we're going to try to cover. First of all, I want to make sure that we all are here for the right reasons. So perhaps just for maybe a minute or two, we can talk about why are we gathered here today? You know, why MBA? Why is it something that you might even want to consider? Because I know for many of you, if you hear in this introductory class, one of the things you might try to decide for yourself is this even really the right step for me? And then, of course, we'll talk about what is the test. And my aim is going to be to share with you some of the things that perhaps are not very easy to find. And maybe we'll dig a little bit deeper into what the exam really means. We will do some questions today, I promise. So we'll talk about some real strategies that you can use already in your preparation. Of course, we'll talk about what it would take to get a high score. What do people do who get high scores? How they approach their studies, how they structure their studies, what are some of the resources that they're using. I will share some strategies with you. And then, of course, we'll talk about the resources. And then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. We'll talk about the next steps. And most importantly, I will talk about what you can do from this moment on, because I think we can all be on the same page that you won't, unfortunately, be ready for the test at 9 p.m. today, Eastern Standard Time. And that is unfortunate because the test does take a little bit longer. So what do I do afterwards? And we'll talk about this as well towards the end of the class today. And if you stay till the very end, then you're going to have some really nice bonuses that you can take away with you as well. So first of all, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk very, very briefly about why MBA. And perhaps I can ask you just so that I can learn a little bit more about you. So please feel free to share your reasons for doing the MBA, maybe your personal reasons. And by the way, if you don't see what other people type, this is intentional. I see everyone's chat, but you will only see your own chats. And this is just to make you a little bit more open, perhaps to sharing some of the maybe personal questions. And I promise everything stays confidential. And if I even read your question, I won't give you your name. I won't give everyone your name. So you can share any of the things and any questions in the chat box. So I see career advancement. I see progression. I see, okay, get more money. Okay, well, I'm really glad that somebody actually said this, get more money, because, well, why not? I mean, look, this is an investment in yourself. You are investing the next 2 hours to help you take your career to the next level. You're going to be investing tens or maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in this MBA program. So shouldn't you be expecting a return? Okay, anything else? Just please throw in some other reasons why you might want to do an MBA, or maybe why what you could possibly benefit from the MBA, or maybe what are some of your friends expecting if they are already doing the MBA or considering MBA. Okay, I see develop my skills. Okay, I see more opportunities. Okay, I see move to a new country. Okay, yeah, that's definitely a good reason. Okay, leave my job and do something else. Yeah, that is definitely a reason. A lot of the people who do the MBA will be switching their career and doing something that they haven't done before. Like it's very common, for example, for people with engineering degree or science degree to switch and work in maybe management consulting or investment banking and things like that. Okay, so many of these things that you've shared today, ladies and gentlemen, definitely there are very good reasons. Somebody's saying, will help me manage my brand, will help me manage the brand for the organizations. Yes, so it helps you develop your own personal brand, of course, and also you will associate yourself with the brand of the university, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. There's some really important factors to consider when you are actually choosing the MBA program. Right, we'll talk about this today as well. So when you are deciding to invest in the MBA, of course, you want to be rewarded for this process. You want to be rewarded personally, professionally, and financially, right? And you want to get some perks. You want to get some benefits. So there are many benefits for maybe your personal business. There are benefits for climbing the corporate ladder a little bit faster. I'll give you some examples as well. You know, some people who come to Admit Master, they are already doing really well in their careers. We have people who are already vice presidents, for example, at fairly large companies, and they realize that without the MBA, it's very hard for them to continue climbing. Some of the people are saying, look, I have this startup idea, but when I pitch it to the investors, without the MBA, they don't really believe I'll be able to execute, right? Because when the investors bring in money to the table, they don't just want to know that it's the greatest idea. They also want to know whether this idea will make money. And that is why they're looking for people who have this ability to execute. And that is what the MBA is teaching us. I guess I'm going to give you one more reason. And this is the quote from The Economist magazine. The Economist does a lot of research into management education, MBA programs, master's programs, and they publish quite a few articles, as well as they publish their own ranking of the MBA programs. So this is actually what they published a couple of years ago, and this was just before ChatGPT burst into our lives. What they basically said is that the next revolution is going to be automation of our intellectual work. Because we've had automation when it comes to physical work. For example, you probably know how many people assemble Tesla cars, and the answer is zero. They're all assembled by robots, by the machines. So the next step is going to be to replace intellectual work. And when you're thinking about what sort of a work would I be doing, you know, you would notice, for example, that the picture that I've shown you today, this picture, it was generated by AI. So I don't need a photographer. I don't need an editor. All I need to do is just ask ChatGPT or whatever your favorite software to generate this image for me, right? So instead of going and paying maybe a couple $100s to a photographer, now I can get this picture almost instantly. Right? Some of the other things, perhaps like computer programming. Now, computer programs write computer programs, right? So a lot of the intellectual work is being outsourced. So when you're really thinking about what sort of a skill do you want to invest in, then you got to be very careful about whether that skill is really vulnerable to automation by artificial intelligence, or that is probably the skill that won't be. And the skill that probably won't be, at least in the foreseeable future, hopefully during our lifetimes, will be things such as creativity, managerial expertise, working with people. And that's what the MBA is about, managing business. Machines can do technical tasks, but so far they cannot manage the businesses. So that's why we need the humans. And that's why the MBA program right now becomes a fairly attractive option. Now, this also, of course, translates into the income. Here, if you see average income growth here in Canada over 40 years, you would notice that the rich people get richer and the middle class kind of gets squeezed in the middle. And that is true. That's just what's happening is people who have these skills that are a little more unique, a little more valuable, they're going to continue getting a premium. So this is actually the chance for you, ladies and gentlemen, to get that premium for your work. Because let's be honest, the cost of living now is so high that unless you're making a couple $100,000, you can't afford the shoebox in the sky in Toronto. So how do you get there? How do you get in the top 10 to 20%? Well, believe it or not, there is a shortcut. I mean, our life's full of shortcuts, right? And unfortunately, our life is not, life expectancy hopefully is getting longer and we're enjoying life, but our life isn't long enough to try to figure out everything by ourselves without taking shortcuts. So MBA, getting an MBA degree is one of these shortcuts to get into the top 10% of income earners. In Canada, for example, an average MBA graduate will make somewhere in the range of $100,000 to $120,000 a year upon graduation. So that puts you automatically in the top 10%. If you look at the United States or Europe, some of the global top programs, then, for example, you would see that the average salary, and this is 3 years after graduation, the average salary will be somewhere in the range of 200 to 250. So $250,000 American. So in Canadian dollars, if you are in Canada, that's close to about 350 to 400. So this is the salary of people who are basically in their early to mid 30s. And you would notice that MBA effectively doubles to 2.5 times the salary. And this is the average. So there's a very clear return on investment, right? So when you're thinking about your MBA, you're really going to take this, need to take this long-term gain in mind, right? There's short-term and there's long-term. And sometimes when you're really trying to decide what program to go to, then sometimes many people are trying to decide based on, this program is $5,000 less than that program, so I'm going to go there. But then your potential salary could be $50,000 more, right, if you go to that program. And also, coming to the topic of our today's class, the GMAT score can be a pretty significant factor in determining your eligibility for entrance scholarships. And the entrance scholarships in the MBA programs are actually quite large. We have had our clients get scholarships. The largest scholarship that one of our clients got a couple of years ago was 170,000 US dollars to one of the top 10 US schools. So essentially it covered the entire tuition as well as living expenses. Right? The majority of our clients would get scholarships somewhere in the range of $30,000, but could be as large as over $100,000. So one of these factors that will help you get there is, of course, the GMAT, Graduate Management Admission Test. This test has been around for a very long time, ladies and gentlemen. It's not a new test. It was created originally back in the 1950s by the top business schools in the US who said we need some sort of a standardized way to choose the best candidates. So they've created this test right now. This test is in the 11th edition. So there have already been 11 iterations of this test. This is now the test that's also known as the GMAT Focus Edition. It is the shortest test of all of the GMATs that we have had before. It's only 2 hours and 15 minutes. It consists of 3 sections: quantitative reasoning, verbal reasoning, as well as data insights. Each section is 45 minutes long, approximately 20 questions in each section. You can do these sections in any order. You're going to have 1 10-minute break. And at the end of the exam, you are going to be given a series of scores. You're going to be given a raw score for each of the sections. The raw score is going to be from 60 to 90. So you're going to get 3 scores of 60 to 90. You're then going to get a combined score that's going to be on a scale of 205 to 805. And then for each of these scores, you are going to be receiving a percentile score. Does anybody know what does a percentile score mean? So for example, what if you get a 90th percentile? What does that actually mean? Does that mean that you're getting 90% of the questions right? No. That actually means that you were able to beat 90% of people who are taking this test. Right? So that is why the business schools are very interested in this test, because they want to know not just who is able to prepare for this test, but who has the right resilience to study for this test, the right study ethics to actually see the test through the end. Yes, so if you are 90th percentile, for example, then that means you're in the top 10% of everybody who has taken this test. Now, on the test itself, you're going to see 3 different sections, as we mentioned, and there will be some questions that are related to math and some questions that are not. There's slightly more questions that are related to math because data insights, more than half of the questions actually have math. But you could think of this as almost kind of like a half and half. Half of the questions have math and half of the questions don't. Today, we're talking about the questions that don't have math. 2 weeks from now, we're going to talk about questions that do. So if you haven't been to our Math Refresher class, then please sign up on our website. It is a free class, and it's also 2 hours. That next Math Refresher class is on June 19th, actually exactly 2 weeks from now. We are going to be talking about specifically problem-solving questions, which are math questions from the quantitative reason section, as well as data sufficiency questions, of which the majority of questions are math that are from the data insights. And today we're going to be talking about critical reasoning questions, which are short passages, as well as reading comprehension questions, which are longer passages. So we're going to talk about both today. And we're going to be actually doing a few questions today. We're going to start doing one very, very shortly, maybe in just a minute or two. There's something really important that I also want to mention about this test that we need to understand. Right? Very often, I'm going to hear people saying, I tried a couple of questions, they seem very easy, the exam should be straightforward, and then they go for the test, they try to do the full test, and they realized, well, the full test is so much harder than these questions that they've done. So what actually happened? Well, what happens is that on the exam, there are questions of different difficulties. There are very easy questions that almost anybody can do, and they're very hard questions that very, very few people do. So for every question, essentially, you could think of the question has almost like a percentile by itself. So if the question has a 90th percentile, that means 90% of people get it wrong, and only 10% of people get it right. If the question is 99th percentile, that means very, very few people, only 1% of people get this right. So this is how your score is determined. The GMAT essentially is going to give you questions of various difficulties, and it notices how you're answering the questions. So it won't just give you, a bunch of easy, a bunch of medium, a bunch of difficult questions, and then try to figure out how you did. It actually will change the difficulty. For example, if you keep making mistakes, it won't give you difficult questions at all. Just keep giving you easier questions. And if you're answering many of the questions correctly, it'll just keep giving you harder questions, because it wants to figure out, of those hard questions, how many you're going to answer correctly. So that's how it can very accurately determine your score within very few questions. It doesn't have to give you hundreds of questions, it can only give you about 20 questions, and it can pretty much exactly figure out where you stand. So if you'd like a certain score, maybe let's say 85, which is an excellent score, 60 to 90, then you would want to make sure that you're able to deal with very difficult questions under pretty severe time pressure. So simply doing a question that is maybe easy and taking your time, maybe like 10 minutes, yeah, that might be okay today, but on the day of the test, that's not really how things are going to work. It is going to be a challenging test. It is designed to continuously push your limits. But if you're able to prepare and if you're able to handle it, then you definitely are going to be able to get a good score. So with this in mind, let's take a look at some questions. Let me show you the first question that we're going to be doing today. This is what's called a critical reasoning question. It is a short passage. Right? I will give you maybe like 45 seconds or so to read it and try to make sense of it. And then we'll actually talk about this question. So try to understand what's going on here. I'll give you some time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been about a minute for this question. So, well, you would notice that here you are given a passage as well as a question related to this passage, right? And the question specifically was the statement above in boldface. So there were some words that were bolded. Place which of the following roles in the ethicist argument? Well, look, I'm not going to ask you yet to describe the answer, even though that is entirely possible to describe this answer and exactly what role does this play. I'm going to ask you a simpler question first, and that is, how many times did you read this passage during that 1 minute that I've given you? Let me know in the chat box. How many times did you read it? Once, twice, 3 times, 4 or 5 times? Okay, I see 2 times, 3 times, okay, 2 times. Okay, so nobody has read it once from what I'm seeing so far. Now, the most I'm seeing 4 times. Yeah, most people 2 to 3 times. Okay, perfect. And of this passage that you've read 2 or 3 times, how much of this would you really understand? Just please give me on a scale of 0 to 100. 0 means I have no idea what's going on here, what this essence is trying to say. 100 means this is so natural to me. I understand exactly what's going on. Maybe I've taken some philosophy classes and I know exactly what's happening here. So let me know, 0 to 100%, how much of this do you really feel that you understand? Okay, I see 40%, 60%, 70%, 90%, 80%, 20%. Okay. Okay, yeah, 40%. All right. So look, here's what we're going to do right now. We focus on trying to understand this passage, and you've read this more than once. So here's what I'm going to do right now. I will give you 20 more seconds if you would like to look at this passage one more time. I will then take it away and I will show you the options. I feel the pressure is going up. Don't worry. Once you've read this passage, you honestly don't need to go back to it. Right? So I'm going to show you the options, and I'll ask you to choose what, in your opinion, is the option that answers this question correctly. So here I'm going to give you about 20 seconds, and I'll show you the options, and then I'll launch a quick poll so that you can actually choose the one that you think, in your opinion, is correct. There we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we've been working on this question now for about 4 minutes. I'm going to ask you now to choose the answer that you think, in your opinion, is the best or is correct. And we're going to play a little game here in the class today. And I always tell my students in a class that the only place when it really matters to answer the question correctly is the real test. So many people, when they're answering the questions, they determine their success by whether they got this question right. But when you're studying, what I might suggest that you do instead is determine your success by whether you were able to learn something from the question. So it doesn't actually matter whether you got this right or wrong. If you got it wrong, but then you go back to this question and say, there's something I can learn, that's a success. Okay, perfect. So let me go ahead and finish the poll. Thanks so much for answering the question. I see that the votes have split, and the most popular answers here that I'm seeing are C, followed by B, and then we have votes for every other option. So let's go back to the passage just for a second, ladies and gentlemen, and let's just talk very briefly about what we're seeing in front of us here. Well, we are told that we are given an ethicist argument. So we'll talk about what's an argument in just a moment, but I'm sure that you probably know what is an argument. You might not know what's an ethicist or who's an ethicist, but I think you can imagine it's somebody who studies ethics. And so let me ask you, we are given an argument by an ethicist. This person's talking about praising for doing what's right and being virtuous and things like that. So let me ask you, how much of this stuff, how much of the ethics here in the passage do you really need to understand? Tell me on a scale of 0 to 100%, how much of this stuff about ethics do you need to know or you need to understand? I mean, trying to get into a business school, right? So what do you think on a scale of 0 to 100? How much of the ethics do you need to know? Well, the answer is 0. Yeah, you don't need to know anything about ethics. You don't even need to understand anything about ethics, because this question isn't about ethics. You will say, well, wait a second, it is about ethics. Well, the topic of this question is ethics. And, we're not going to argue about ethics. And my personal opinion is if you're trying to get into business school, you need to be ethical, but you don't need to be an expert in ethics, and certainly not in any other topic that the GMAT can throw your way. What you need to do instead is focus on answering the question. We have so little time, and we don't really often have time to understand exactly what's going on there. I mean, who cares, honestly? We're not going to be asked about what this person believes or what this person said. We're simply asked for a role or to describe a role of a statement in a boldface. So for that, what we need is to understand the roles of different statements in the argument. So essentially, instead of understanding what these statements are saying, we need to understand how these statements fit into the overall argument. Okay? So instead of focusing on the jargon of the argument, I'm going to focus on the keywords that connect the statements together to build the argument. And if I want to focus on those keywords, that's actually all I need to understand. And that's why I initially asked you how many times you read this, and this is very common. Almost everybody will continue reading this. And if I gave you more time, you would probably continue reading it, because the subject matter here is a little hard to understand. What does it mean? And the logic kind of goes back and forth, especially virtues of doing what's right, but then they're doing what's wrong. Now, I don't need to understand any of that, right? See, if I start focusing on different things, essentially, I'm doing things differently from maybe the way that I used to do things, and maybe the way that some or many other people are doing things, then I can expect a different result. So if we were to break this down, essentially, the author begins by saying, somebody made a mistake. That's how they start the argument. Somebody made a mistake. Well, look, somebody made a mistake. That's the person's opinion. Now, when you express an opinion in the argument, you obviously need to support it by providing some reasons why we actually believe that these people made a mistake. You can't just say these people made a mistake without explaining it. So what will follow that very first statement, the one that we crossed out, will actually be that explanation. So whatever these people said doesn't really matter. They made a mistake. Here's why. So that part in bold is actually the explanation of why the author believes they made a mistake. In fact, the entire rest of the argument is that explanation of why the author believes that. Now, the question was asking us specifically about the part in bold. So there was for although it is true that blah, 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 blah. So if we were to just again stay high level, essentially what's going on here is they're also saying these people are wrong, even though I agree with X, let's just call this whole boldest thing X. So I agree with X, X is true. Nevertheless, these people are still wrong. That's what happened, right? So we started by making a claim that these people are wrong. This is what we call the main claim of the argument, also known as the author's main opinion, the main point of the argument. And then the author said, yeah, I agree with that piece of evidence. Nevertheless, these people are wrong. Okay, so that part in bold is a piece of evidence that the author agrees with, since the author said, for although it is true. Notice that we haven't spoken a word about ethics. Let's now go back to the answer choices and see if maybe we can start evaluating them one by one. Maybe we can start with C, since this was the most popular answer. C says that that statement in bold is a faulty claim. What do you think? Was that part in bold a faulty claim? I mean, technically it wasn't even a claim. And it certainly wasn't faulty, since they also said for although it is true. So based on this thing alone, we can eliminate answer choice C. The rest is irrelevant. We found the reason why it's wrong. We can eliminate it. We honestly don't have the time to read everything very slowly. You could just accept the fact that on the GMAT, you're likely not going to have the time to read everything from start to finish, even once. And we certainly don't have time to read this more than once. So it's not. D, it is according to the argument a commonly held opinion that is nevertheless false. We know it's true. They also said it's true, so it's not D. Don't have to spend any more time on D. E, it reports an observation that the argument claims is false. Again, I can stop. I need to be very efficient with my time. E is out, and now I'm down to two options only, A and B. Now, here's what's going to happen, ladies and gentlemen, right now. We have two options. So of these two options, how many could be correct? Is there such a thing on the GMAT as two correct answers? No, there isn't. There's always one correct answer and always four wrong answers. And even though sometimes the GMAT will ask you a question to choose the best answer, what they really mean is choose the one answer. There's no such thing. If you want to make a note of this, there is no such thing as a best answer. And I can talk about this for a very long time, and I can actually explain to you why. But please just take a leap of faith and just trust me on this one. There is no such thing as a better answer. If you want to know the actual reason why they say this, give me a call and I'll actually explain to you. It's probably going to take about half an hour to explain why they worded it this way, even though there's always one correct answer and always four wrong answers. So I am now down to two options. Of these two options, I know only one's going to be right, and that means the other one is guaranteed to be wrong. So here's what I can do. I can look at either one of them. It doesn't really matter which one. Many people, when they're down to options, they're starting to evaluate the one that they think is right. I suggest that you start evaluating the one that you think is easier to evaluate, because at this point, it does not matter which one you evaluate. So just go for the one that's easiest and fastest. If it's right, great. If it's wrong, great. It's the other one. So maybe let's go for A. Looks a little bit quicker. A says that that part in bold is a claim for which the argument attempts to provide justification. So that basically part in the middle was the claim or a claim, whatever. But we said that it was actually evidence to support the claim. There's quite a big difference between a claim and the evidence. And we'll talk about this in just a few minutes. So that part was evidence. It was not the claim. That's why answer choice A is wrong. And B happens to be the correct answer to this question. Whew. All right. So what we've used here, ladies and gentlemen, is the process of elimination. Right? We've been able to eliminate the wrong answers, and we found the right one. Sometimes you will be looking for the right answers. Sometimes you're actually going to be eliminating the wrong answers. There are many different strategies on the GMAT. Right? And that's why in our class, for example, it actually takes 6 weeks for us to go through these strategies twice a week for 3.5 hours, because there's just a lot of them. And we work very, very efficiently in the class. So just to summarize what we've done here, ladies and gentlemen, is we have looked at the question from a different perspective. And we try to do something that most people don't do. We try to read not for understanding the content, but rather we try to apply our reasoning skills and our skills of understanding the structure of the argument to actually get down to the correct answer as quickly as possible. Again, leveraging the fact that this is a multiple choice exam. So if you might be wondering, well, what will help me get a high score? I'm going to give you a quote from the GMAT, which is the organization that makes this test, actually creates this test. Here's what they say. They say, rather than testing your knowledge of business or any other subject matter. This is actually, ladies and gentlemen, one of the most important things in this quote. Because what they essentially say is that this is not a knowledge-based exam. Instead, what they're saying, this is a skills-based exam. Preparation for a knowledge-based exam and for a skills-based exam is actually very different. Many people, when they prepare for this test, they prepare for it as if it's a knowledge-based exam, at least as if this test will somehow ask them what is the formula, or perhaps their knowledge of business or knowledge of something else. And then they get a big surprise on the day of the test, that every single question they will see on the day of the test will be not the question they've seen before. In fact, I'm going to give you good news right now. And the good news is that everything you need to actually know for the test is so basic that the majority of us have forgotten it because it's just been so long ago. So that's kind of good news and bad news, right? I mean, the bad news, we forgot it. The good news is that we've all learned it. I can tell you, I have an 8-year-old at home. She has already learned probably about 20% of the series tested on the GMAT. You know, numbers and digits and things like that. Yeah, she's 8. I mean, her dad is a GMAT instructor, but she actually learned it in school. The majority of the stuff was from elementary school, and this is basic algebra, basic arithmetic, some basic statistics, as well as, of course, your understanding of the structures of the English language. So this is just the foundation. We all have this foundation because we all, by now, if you are considering an MBA or a master's program, you definitely will have graduated from a high school. So we all have this foundation. But what we need, though, is not the foundation, but we need to develop these skills. I love analogies, so I'm going to give you a few analogies as we go through the class today, because analogies help us connect the neurons in our brain. And we actually, as GMAT instructors, I'm a professional GMAT instructor. I've been doing this for 15 years now, and I can tell you that I've got a lot of training in GMAT, in teaching the GMAT, and it wasn't just the content training that I've learned from some of the best teachers in the world. One of our instructors, who was actually my personal coach, was at some point named the best instructor in the world for a fairly large test preparation company from the United States. Right, so he was my personal coach. Another one, what my personal coach is actually a person who is a practical psychologist, and he is actually training university professors and college professors on how to better deliver the material and how to get the best results from the students. Right, so he's also my personal coach. Right, so we've been doing this for a very long time, and what I have also learned from these people is that analogies really help us relate things. So I'm going to give you an analogy, and that is learning how to play golf. We're now getting into the summer. So some of you might be playing golf, some of you might be considering to pick up golf. And we live, 5 minutes from a golf course. So every time I'm driving home from work, I actually see people on a driving range and they just hit the damn ball over and over and over and over again. And I'm like, if you don't know anything about the game of golf, or maybe you haven't really thought about how we develop the skills, some people might think, well, why do you hit the damn ball so much? Can't you just hit a couple times and, that's it? It doesn't really work this way. If we want to develop a new skill, we got to practice. And it's not just practice. There are people who've been practicing for years and decades and they're not getting better. Right? It's smart practice. So that's why there's the actual process, and there's coaching on the GMAT, there's high performance, and even people like Tiger Woods, they continue practicing, they have a coach, and they always analyze what they're doing because they want to get the best, and they want to get the best possible performance of them. And being in top 10% of the GMAT is not very easy, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it's easier than actually being top 10% in golf, probably. At least it doesn't take that long, but it will require a little bit more than just reading a book. And so I've used this a little bit of a comparison just so that you can see, of course, when it comes to playing golf, it makes total sense. It wouldn't be enough just to read the book. The same thing on the GMAT. It wouldn't be enough just to read the book. You do really need to start developing these skills. And there are many skills, like time management skills, for example. How do you answer the question correctly in less than 2 minutes? Because for these questions that I've just shown you, you have less than 2 minutes, just 1 minute and 57 seconds. Or, for example, how do you decide between the two options that both look pretty good or both look really bad? How do you decide? How do you make this decision? So these skills here at Admit Master, we call these skills thinking like a CEO, because the GMAT is really about demonstrating the skill set. You do need to know some things in the structure of the test and everything else, and we're certainly going to teach you that. But the ultimate idea is to really help you develop the skills that are going to help you be more successful in your career as well. Okay, so we know now and we understand what this test is about. It's about demonstrating the skill. It's not about knowledge. So let me ask you now, there's a little bit of a quiz here. And I mean, it's not really a quiz. There are no right and wrong answers. But I want to ask you or hear from you, what do you think makes, particularly the verbal section, technology issues, right? So potentially what makes the verbal section challenging is potentially some technical difficulties with your exam, right? Yeah, that could also happen. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, you've just seen why you should not be taking the test from home, right? I have a very fast computer at home, and I have a very good fiber connection to home. Nevertheless, that's what happens sometimes, right? So don't take the exam from home. If you can, go to a test center. At least if something happens, they cannot say this was your fault. So from what I'm seeing, actually, the most popular answer is lost to read and not enough time. But then after that, there are two actually answers that I wanted to talk about. And that is answers seem subjective and several answer choices were correct. So this is something that is really a very common belief about the verbal section in comparison to the quant section. Now, when I ask people, tell me what's different about quant and verbal, many people are going to say, well, look, in quant, there's always the right answer. It's always black and white. I can always solve the equation, find X, and that's what I need. I'll look at the answer choices, and here it goes. But on verbal, first of all, they're asking me for the best answer, and maybe I'm down to two options, and I'm not really sure which one's better. I can talk to my friend, and my friend thinks that A is better, but I think B is better, right? So it could be a little bit subjective. And how do I know exactly which one's right? There's no equation that I can solve for X. And that's a very common perception that really stands in a way of us succeeding on the verbal section. I'm going to tell you something right now that may be a little bit hard to believe, but that is actually true. The verbal section is a lot more black and white than what it seems like, at least at first. And the reason why we think that the answers are subjective, or maybe that there's more than one right answer, is that very often we just don't know what makes the answer right or what makes the answer wrong. The GMAT is very good at trying to hide things. That's why we need a little bit of attention to detail, and we also need some speed. So that's why practice is very important. Recognizing these patterns in the questions, recognizing is very important. And also, of course, knowing what to look for is very important. I'm going to tell you something that maybe be even harder to believe right now, but the quantitative section on the GMAT is actually a lot less black and white than what most people think. Because for me to actually solve for X and get the exact answer, I often need more than 2 minutes, the time that I don't have on the test. So very often, I'm just going to have to go with what I think is the most likely correct answer on the quant section. So you could also then say that it's kind of subjective, because I could think A is more likely, and my friend can say that B is more likely. So there's a lot less difference between quant and verbal in that respect. Right? What's challenging for the verbal section, is that many of us haven't really learned exactly what to look for. In quant, at least we learned how to solve algebra. Unfortunately, though, on the day of the test, we won't really have time often to solve the algebra. And that's why, if algebra is the only strategy that so far you've been using to approach these questions, or if you're simply wondering, what are some of the other strategies that I could use, please make sure that you sign up for our Master Refresher class 2 weeks from now. And of course, if you want to know all of these strategies, come to our class, come to our course for 6 weeks. So what is it that you're going to be looking for in the arguments? Well, we kind of started touching upon this already. We started talking about the arguments. And the first argument that we talked about today was the argument by this ethicist. In fact, I think we need to talk about what's an argument. And so when it comes to the word argument, what usually comes to mind? If somebody says, well, somebody has an argument, what do we usually think? It's maybe Some people are arguing, right? Maybe there's some sort of a debate, maybe a civilized debate, or maybe a heated discussion. That's what we usually think as an argument, right? People argue essentially, right? And you're not going to see that on the GMAT. There are very few exceptions. There's a very, very small number of questions that are actually given to you as a dialogue. But even then, people are not really fighting. There's somebody saying X and somebody else is responding and saying B. So the argument on the GMAT, ladies and gentlemen, is usually made by just one person. For example, that ethicist. Sometimes that person is going to disagree with other people, but sometimes not. So how can you have an argument where nobody's disagreeing with anyone? That's actually fun arguments. If you want to argue with yourself sometimes, please do know you don't have to disagree with yourself. All you really need is two things, and then you're going to have an argument. Thing number one, you need a point. What is it that you actually believe? Sometimes people argue and they're like, what's your point? So you need that point. We call it the claim of an argument. There's some other synonyms that the GMAT will use. For example, they might use the word conclusion. They might use the word main point. They might use the word main idea or main hypothesis of the argument. But that's basically the same thing. What is it that the author believes? Let me give you an idea of an argument. Since we're here in the Admit Master GMAT class, if the argument is, I will get a high score on the GMAT. That is my claim of an argument. I believe, I think that I will get a high score on the GMAT. It's not a fact. That's just something that I think. That's a hypothesis. Now, if I simply say I'll get a high score on the GMAT, some people might say, yeah, for sure. I mean, we know you. And some people are going to say, yeah, right. Okay? So what do we need? Well, we need some sort of evidence. We need to support our conclusion. That's what we've seen in the ethicist argument. So we're seeing here as well. So the support, also known as the evidence, also known as the premise, or also known as the reason behind that point or that idea, or the support behind that point or that idea, right? So these are some of the terms that the GMAT is using, would actually be that I'm taking the Admit Master GMAT Mastery Program. So I've given you the reason, maybe even one reason that's related to that topic. Obviously, if I say, because my dog is white and fluffy, my dog is really white and fluffy, but it has nothing to do with me getting a high score on the GMAT, except maybe I believe that I'm going to get some pet therapy. Yeah, she's really cute. Okay? So I need a reason that's related to my claim, and I need at least one that would support that claim. I could actually take this argument and make it even better. And I can do so by bringing in additional piece of evidence. For example, I could say the Admit Master GMAT Mastery Program has been around for over 20 years. I could say I have a lot of friends who've taken this program and they did really well on the GMAT. I could say I will commit to this program and do my homework and reach out for help and join the study groups and attend classes. So now you have more reasons to believe that, and that becomes a better argument. And so I'm giving you more reasons that support my conclusion. So see what's happening here? I can actually play around with this argument. I can do something with this argument. In fact, the next question we're going to be doing is going to ask us to do exactly that. The next question is going to ask us to support the argument that was already given to us. Right? So you've seen an example of how I can support this particular argument, right? Give you more evidence. So in this question, which is real GMAT question from past exams, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. So now I'm going to give you about 2 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, to read this question. I'm going to show you both the passage and the answer choices, and of course the question itself. And I'm going to launch a poll So please answer that question. Now, one thing I'm going to ask you is please don't Google this question. This is one of the real questions from past exams. So if you Google it, you will be able to find the answer. But we've already agreed that the point is not to find the right answer, at least not here. The point is to learn. And besides, the poll of answering the questions or choosing the answers is anonymous. So I wouldn't even know what you've chosen. So there we go. This is a question. I'll give you about 2 minutes. One more minute. Give you 30 more seconds to finish. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I see that, well, most of the people have already voted. So let me go ahead and end the poll. And actually, let me see if I can share the results with you. Just give me 1 second. Just so that you could see what everybody answered down together and talk about this question together. Okay, so there we go. As you could see, B is overwhelmingly the most popular answer, followed by A, but A is a distant second. And then just a few people for E, nobody for C and D. So hopefully B would be the correct answer to this question. We'll find out in a moment. But what I want to do is I want to try to read your mind a little bit. I'm going to share with you what are some of the ways of approaching this question. And maybe if that is the way that you have approached the question, just please give me number 1 in the chat box. Just put number 1 if that is what you've been doing while we're going through the question. So the first step, let's just call it the answer that seems right. Let's call it the seems right way. I mean, look, we don't have an equation to solve, so we can go through the passage, go through the question, go through the answer choices, and find the one that seems right. This passage is maybe a little bit hard to understand at first. I mean, the topic here is a little bit easier, but you know, how things really play together might not be immediately obvious. So most people are going to read it 2 or 3 times, then they'll read the answer choices, then they'll go back and read the passage again, and maybe read the answer choices again. So we need some sort of a strategy, right? We need a way to answer this question quickly. But so far, what we have is that we have a passage about earthquakes in this city of Korean, and there was something about 8365, right? So that's what we know so far. So let's actually see which of these answer choices seems like it's going to be actually relevant to what we're talking about. A talks about drinking vessels. Nothing about earthquakes. I mean, graves, drinking vessels, so what? And we also said preceding and following AD 365, so doesn't really seem like it's doing anything. B, well, in B, we talk about Cyprus, we talk about earthquake, we talk about 365, so I like that so far. C, minted 365, so coins minted. Okay, I don't know what coins have to do with this, so kind of sounds a little weird. D says small statues, again, 300 to 400. Korean, pretty wide range. Yeah, Korean, but where's the earthquake? So also sounds weird. Probably not right. E, stone inscriptions, the Greek alphabet. Okay, definitely using Cyprus after 365. Okay, so what? What does this have to do with the earthquake? So you know what? I mean, seems I can probably read through them again, just to kind of try to be sure that maybe it is B. I don't really find anything better than that. I can't really be stuck on this question for too long because my time's ticking, right? I mean, the exam's very fast paced, so fine. I'm just gonna pick B and move on. Maybe I'm gonna spend 2 minutes, hopefully, on this question. Hopefully, I'm not going to spend much more than that because I don't really have much more than that. So, I mean, maybe or maybe not, we got the right answer. We'll find this out. I mean, B certainly was the most popular answer, but we certainly were not confident, and yeah, not as fast, perhaps. So maybe we can learn a little bit of a structure around these questions. And one of the things that we can learn is, well, how do we approach these questions actually? What are some of the rules maybe that we can follow? Since this is a standardized test, there must be a way to approach these questions to be a little bit more efficient. And there absolutely is. For every question type, there are always strategies, right? So like in our class, for example, if you come, we're going to talk about strategies for every major question type, but then we go deeper into every individual type of a question, talk about what do you do if you see that question, not this question. Right? So you need those strategies, right? And when it comes to critical reasoning, one of the strategies that you probably want to adopt right now is that you might want to read the question in a little bit of a different order compared to what most other people do. Most people read the passage first and then the question. And by the time they get to the question, A, they might have forgotten what was in the passage, and B, they might realize, oh, I wasn't really looking for that stuff that was in the question while I was reading the passage. So one of the things that we teach in our class, one of the very first things we teach is start reading the question first. So what is the question actually saying? It's saying here, which of the following is true, or which one of the following is true, most strongly supports the hypothesis. So I'm asked to support the hypothesis. Well, there are many different types of questions on the GMAT. You've seen that the question about S's wasn't asking us to support something, it was actually asking us to describe or overvote a statement. There's more than 10 different types of questions in critical reasoning, different things they might possibly ask. And of course, there are different ways to ask them. But this is what's called a strengthen question. So what we're going to need to do is essentially strengthen the conclusion in the argument. And strengthen the argument, and most specifically, we're going to be strengthening the conclusion or the hypothesis. So what we might want to do is actually find that hypothesis. What was that hypothesis? It was actually that the destruction was due to a major earthquake. That was the conclusion. The other things in this argument were pieces of evidence. So we were told about the pattern of debris in collapsed buildings. This is evidence. This is not the hypothesis. So it's not that we hypothesized that there were patterns. We know there were patterns. Okay, so They hypothesized this town was destroyed by this earthquake, and we are looking for the support to that claim. We're looking for essentially another reason to believe that claim, right? Just like I've given you an example with the Admin Master GMAT course, giving you another reason to believe that. Maybe I've read my reviews and I saw there's so many people are getting good scores. Yeah, so here's another reason for me to believe that. And so I need that other reason to believe that what they've hypothesized is most likely true. Well, let's see which of the answer choices would actually do that. A talks about drinking vessels found before and after. I don't feel that it's relevant, to be honest. I mean, honestly, it doesn't really matter what you feel, right? Never go by what you feel. The GMAT exam, and I'm saying this with all due respect, because I want you to get a very good score on the GMAT. The GMAT doesn't care about what you feel. The GMAT gives you words, sentences, statements, paragraphs that are written in a very precise language, and your job is to break it down and understand what's right and what's wrong. Not based on what we believe or how we feel, but based on what was given to us in the passage itself, and as much as needed to answer the question. So, drinking vessels, I don't think it's relevant. Let's go to the next answer choice. B, most modern histories of Cyprus mention that an earthquake occurred near the island in AD 365. Is that another reason to believe what they've hypothesized? Yeah, it certainly seems like that. Because they hypothesized that the town was destroyed by this earthquake, and here we go. We have more reasons. Most modern histories, not just these poor archaeologists, but a lot of modern histories, that's what they say, the earthquake occurred near the island. So it seems like it strengthens the conclusion. Okay, well, let's keep going. Let's see if anything else would strengthen it. How about C? No coins minted after were found. Coins minted, coins, again, I mean, what do coins really have to do with this? We already said drinking vessels have nothing to do with it. Coins, maybe also statues, inscriptions, I don't think they're relevant. So you know what? Now we have a strategy. We know exactly what we're looking for. We see it, we pick it, we move on. Unfortunately, though, we didn't get this question right. I know it might sound a little strange, or you might be a little surprised that B is not the right answer. You might wonder, well, how come? I mean, most people chose B, and it just seems so appealing. It just seems so natural. It feels like it's the right answer. And that's why we don't really want to go by how it feels, because the GMAT likes to play with our minds. So let's talk about a different way of approaching this question. Let's call it the master the skill way. Knowing the rules, yeah, that's great. But it's kind of like knowing the rules of the road and then trying to drive a car. I need to really master this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go a little bit further, not just doing the checklist. First of all, we can certainly start by answering or by reading that question. That's still important. The question is asking us to strengthen that argument. So it is still a strengthened question. What we're going to do next is we're going to recognize what are some of the ways for us to strengthen the argument. Well, look, the only way for us to strengthen the argument is to bring in a new piece of evidence that we didn't know before, because that's what's going to strengthen it. So if you're really thinking about the structure of the argument, we said that there's evidence and there's conclusion. The evidence is something we know. It's a fact. The conclusion is something we believe. Okay? So if the conclusion relies on the evidence, and yet we're not quite sure whether the conclusion is true, there must also be something we must believe, but we didn't really say. And that's what we call the assumption in the argument. Right? So yes, there are some facts that were given to us. Nevertheless, this wasn't a 100% logical argument. If it were, we wouldn't be able to strengthen it. Right? So there was something that was not said in the argument. And that is what was not said. What the author needed to believe is the assumption. So what should the author really be assuming here? What do they need to assume? Well, I mean, let's really break this down one more time. What do we know? Well, we know, number one, is that this town was destroyed by an earthquake. Well, at least we know that there's enough evidence to believe that the town was destroyed by an earthquake based on this pattern. Okay, so that's the first thing that we know. What else do we know? Well, at the very end of this argument, we see the earthquake, a major earthquake known to have occurred near the island in AD 365. So it seems like we do know that there was an earthquake in AD 365. That's all we know from this argument, is that the town was destroyed by an earthquake, or likely destroyed by an earthquake, and there was an earthquake in AD 365. Now they're hypothesizing and they're claiming that the town was destroyed by that particular earthquake. So what do we not know yet? What else could happen or could have happened? Well, if you think about this way and we start asking the right questions to try to uncover the assumptions, right? And just this week, we started 2 new classes. On Monday, we start the LSAT class for law school. And on Tuesday, we start the new GMAT class for, obviously, for the business school. And in both of these classes, I was teaching assumptions. So assumptions is just so much fun to teach. Right, so I'll give you an executive summary of what this really is. So basically, we are now overlooking the possibility that there may have been something else that could have destroyed this town. And most specifically, that something else has got to be a different earthquake. Because we were told the town was destroyed by an earthquake, but we weren't told yet which earthquake destroyed the town. Is it possible that there could have been some other earthquake before or after? Absolutely, right? So it is possible. And that's what we're trying to figure out. Which earthquake? Was it this earthquake in AD 365? Or was it maybe some other earthquake? So far in the argument, we did not have enough information about that. So to claim that this particular earthquake destroyed the town, we had to take a leap of faith, or maybe there's something that we needed to believe, like maybe we had more evidence to actually believe there was that earthquake, not some other one. So that's what we're going to be looking for. That's what we're going to be focusing on in the answer choices. Let's see if we can do that. Answer choice A does not do anything to help us understand exactly which earthquake destroyed the town. Before and after drinking vessels, so what? B, well, surprise. This is something we already knew. And this was a very clever trap by the GMAT. They're giving us a fact or some more evidence to support the fact that we already knew. Now, you might say, and that's why some people believe that there might be more than one right answer. You might say, wait a second, but wouldn't this support the argument? I mean, if we have more reasons to believe that there was actually an earthquake in AD 365? I mean, technically, yes, but not on the GMAT. Because on the GMAT, we're very specifically told to accept every piece of evidence that was Wow, this is very strange. Usually this doesn't happen, but you know, um, I'm teaching this class from home. I gotta admit, because in our classroom where we usually teach our classes, we actually have a class going on right now. So I teach from home. Usually, even at home, it doesn't matter. In our classroom, we have a gigabit internet, so it actually never happens. But probably a lot of people are watching Netflix around us today, even though the weather is very nice where I am right now. So I'm not really sure. I apologize for these technical difficulties. So speaking about answer choice B, it does not strengthen. It just basically keeps the argument the same. So that's why it's not the right answer. We need something new. We need the argument to be better than it was before. Let's take a look at answer choice C. Answer choice C tells us that before 365, we found a lot of coins, but after 365, we couldn't really find any coins. Oh, that's interesting. Let's just try to understand what that actually means. Well, before 365, the coins probably had some dates maybe printed on them. We had a bunch of coins. All of a sudden, something happened in 365. So answer choice C suggests that something significant happened. Maybe an earthquake, maybe not. We don't know that. What we do know, though, is that there was an earthquake. Right? So if we put all of these things together, do we have more reasons to believe that it was actually this earthquake that destroyed the town? Yes, absolutely. I mean, we already knew it was the earthquake that likely destroyed the town. We knew there was an earthquake in 365. Now we also know that something big happened in the town and people stopped minting coins, or maybe they didn't even live there anymore. So this absolutely will strengthen our argument. And that's why C must be the right answer. At this point, I will stop. I am not going to continue reading answer choices D and E. Why? Because if I do, two things are going to happen. Number one, I'm going to waste more time. Number two, I might start doubting our answer. This is not a good recipe for success. So if you're sure that the answer that you chose is the answer that you need, you should stop. Now, of course, if you're not sure, then you can continue and then try to narrow down the list of options, maybe to maybe a couple, similarly to what we've done with our first ethicist question, and then try to break the tie. But you can't really always do that, work with all of the answer choices and go through them several times, right? That's why there's strategies for every single type of question that will help you do that more efficiently. All right. Do you have energy for one more critical reasoning question? Let me know in the chat box if you do. Otherwise, we can move on to reading comprehension. Okay. I see a few yeses. So let's do another question, another critical reasoning question. I'll give you 2 minutes for this question. So here's the question again. And of course, the answer choices. So there you go. You have 2 minutes. Well, biology, ladies and gentlemen. You thought that you're coming to a GMAT class. You got a lesson on ethics, archaeology, and now biology. Who knew? Except that, of course, it's not about biology, just like it wasn't about archaeology and it wasn't about ethics. So let's actually talk about this question, and then we'll compare our answers. So here's what we've been told here. We've been asked to find the assumption to this question. So essentially, we've been asked to find what the author needs to believe. Similarly to what we've seen in the previous question, we essentially need to understand what did the author believe but did not say. This was the assumption. What was that gap, essentially? The gap in logic. Something was missing, something we don't know yet, but something we need to know. Okay, so first of all, let's break down this argument. This argument uses a series of formal logic statements. So essentially, you can translate them into if-then statements. And yes, for the GMAT, you should know some formal logic. So in our class, we do teach you a crash course of formal logic because it makes some of these questions very easy. And these are some of the things that you're going to be using in verbal as well as in data insights. So if you've never taken a formal logic class, don't worry. Just come to a class and we're going to teach you everything you need to know when it comes to doing well on the GMAT. So let's take a look at what's going on here. In the first sentence, they told us species with broad geographic ranges probably tend to endure longer. So essentially, they're saying if they have broad ranges, then they tend to endure longer. The broader species range, the more likely they will survive extinction. So if broad range, then most likely going to survive extinction. So broad range, endure longer, and broad range, survive extinction. Okay. Now, what do they then say in the conclusion? In the conclusion, they say, therefore, it's likely that the proportion of species with broad ranges tend to gradually increase. Okay, so broad ranges, we see again broad ranges, but then somewhere out of the blue, they start talking about gradual increase. We never talked about gradual increase before. No, the evidence was they will endure longer and survive extinction. And yet, the conclusion that we're making is they will gradually. Okay, that is seriously not funny. I probably need to talk to our friend Elon Musk to see what is the problem with the internet. I mean, obviously he's been posting a lot on Twitter today, so maybe that's why the internet is a little overwhelmed. Yeah, I'm just joking, of course. I know we're going to talk about politics here. This is, very, very strange. So again, I apologize for that. Wow. So we need to connect, endure longer, and survive extinction. So if they have a broad range, they will endure longer, and if they endure longer, they will gradually increase. Therefore, we can actually build what's called a syllogism from BR to EL and EL to GI. Therefore, BR to GI. So A leads to B leads to C. Therefore, A leads to C. That's what's happening here, and that is why D is actually the correct answer. So again, this is all really, ladies and gentlemen, about the structure of the arguments. There are different ways to analyze the structure. We have seen 3 different types of questions so far. they all really deal with our ability to work with the arguments, not necessarily understand what these arguments are trying to say. Okay, any questions, please throw them in the chat box. But of course, I want to talk about reading comprehension. And then we still need to talk about, the next steps and everything else, right? So kind of save the best for the last, reading comprehension, right? I mean, let me ask you, how many of you are very excited about reading comprehension? Anybody? Whew. Yeah, those long and boring passages, honestly, right? But I think you should be actually very excited about what you're going to learn right now, because this is going to help you beat reading comprehension. Isn't that exciting? Well, similarly to what we've learned in critical reasoning, where we're really going to focus on the structure as opposed to the content, it's going to be a little bit harder to do that in reading comprehension, but we are going to have to try very hard. And there's actually a way to do that. I'm going to share this way with you right now, and I'm actually going to send you a follow-up email tomorrow so that you have this in your notes. So how do we do that? We are going to have to retrain ourselves with how we read. Yeah, I mean, we all know how to read, right? So if I give you an article, you'll probably get back to me and say, okay, so this article was about X and Y and things like that, right? And that's what we're talking about. But on the GMAT, what we do care is how the author is actually structuring their thoughts, how the author is making a point, not what they are saying. What they're saying is actually not that important. How they're saying it, that's what's really important. And that is why you don't need to know anything about that subject matter. It's completely irrelevant. In fact, the less you know about what they're talking about, the better. Because if we know something about that subject matter, we're going to tend to make our own assumptions. And that's a really bad way of getting into traps. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on how the paragraphs in the passage create a story, basically create a narrative. How did the author structure their thoughts? That's what we're going to be paying attention to, not getting immersed in the details or buried in the details. Now, how do we do that? We're going to start asking ourselves questions as we go. And the important question we're going to ask ourselves is, how's the passage organized? Most importantly, what's the purpose of that thing that I just read? Maybe I just read a paragraph, or maybe I just read, a sentence, and then the author started talking about something else. What was the purpose of that? And what I want to do is take some notes, very short notes, shorthand, but I do want to write down and summarize in my own words what the author actually just was doing. Not necessarily what they were saying, but what they were doing. For example, they told us about some maybe old way of doing things, or maybe some old theory that somebody was trying to disprove. Well, why did they talk about the old theory? Maybe because they're going to talk about the new discovery that helps disprove the old theory. So it wasn't actually that important what the old theory was saying, especially if it's very technical. What was important is that somebody's trying to disprove it. So that's what you want to focus on, especially that you have so little time. I mean, look, you have an average of less than 2 minutes per question, and the clock doesn't stop when you start reading comprehension passages. And they're long. And if you've seen them, some of them are really long and hard to read. So once you're done reading the passage, you're going to ask yourself some more questions. So now you're asking yourself questions about the entire passage. You're going to ask yourself, what was that passage about? The whole thing, what was it about? If I were to give this passage a title, what would that title be? Then you're going to ask yourself a question, what was the author's tone or emotion? What essentially was the author's attitude that I can spot? Was it maybe neutral? Was the author taking one of the sides? Was the author trying to be critical? And then finally, you also want to ask yourself a question, what was the author's purpose? Now, why did the author actually do this? Maybe it was to criticize someone. Maybe it was to try to convince us of something. Maybe it was to simply inform us. Maybe it was to analyze something important. And what was the author actually intended to do? What was their goal? It's a little bit different from what was the passage about. The passage could be about, economy in Canada in the 19th century, but the purpose was to contrast it with the economy of the Netherlands and explain how maybe one of these countries developed faster and things like that. So that's where you might want to focus on. So what I might suggest, ladies and gentlemen, is that you start actually reading differently. If you want to succeed on the GMAT, if you want to start reading efficiently and save the time and answer many questions correctly, you need to start doing things differently. And it all starts from reading differently. Reading not for speed, but reading for efficiency. Picking out what's important and perhaps glancing over what's not that important. What is going to be important is how is everything organized, how everything fits together. That's the most important thing. All right. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. Enough about reading comprehension right now. Yes, I know you were probably thinking we're going to do a really long passage today about molecular biology or astrophysics. Not really, no. I mean, if you come to our class around this time, we are going to do a passage on astrophysics, but don't be scared. You're actually going to enjoy it quite a lot. So let's talk about the resources. Actually, how would you beat the test? And there are a couple of things that I really would like for you to take away from this class. And the first one was that, of course, this is a skills-based test. And the way that we study for this test is going to be different. It's going to be, practice, coaching, learning, making mistakes, and then doing things again and again. But there's another simple idea that I would like for you to maybe, again, keep at the back of your mind. If you want results that are different from everybody else, you do need to do things differently. Because if everybody does the same thing the same way, they should technically be getting very similar results. So if you want results in the top 10%, if that's what you really do, like if your goal is to go to a competitive business school and really maybe change your life and maybe get a nice scholarship and get those $250,000 jobs, then you need to really try to model people who are in the top 10%. So here's what you can do. Now, if you have friends, for example, who are studying for the GMAT and are not getting the results that you need, go and ask them. Go and ask that 90% of people, what do they do? And whatever they say, don't do it. Find the people in the top 10% and do what they do to get these results. And there's no magic. There's no silver bullet. I know if you go on YouTube or Chat GPT and ask, how do I get a good score? And sometimes you're gonna have videos popping up saying, I got a score of 760 in just 2 weeks and things like that. And yeah, that's true. There are some people like this. I'm actually one of them. I got a score of 750 in just 2 weeks. Yeah, I hate these people, right? But maybe that's why I became a GMAT instructor, because I know that I've had some really good teachers who taught me different skills, and that's something I can teach. Many students come to me after the class and say, oh, this was one of the most fun classes I've ever had, and I've learned so much. And I'm like, that's great. And really, this is our goal here at Admit Master, is to make this process also enjoyable, but also make sure that we keep you accountable and that you do things that are actually going to help you get the results, because not everything will. And I want to also talk a little bit about just our patterns. Very often, when we need to prepare for the new test, what do? We just go to a bookstore, right? That's the very first step that people do, is they go to a bookstore. So I really commend you for coming here today, because you've done something different from what most people do, which is they pick up the book. But here is the challenge. Books are great, by the way. and they're really helpful for our studies. They have a lot of resources. But here is the challenge. There are a couple of challenges about the books. First of all, books teach the theory, not the skills. Books are really good for teaching us the theory. Very often, books are not going to tell us what's really important. Right? And I have many students who are coming to me and say, I got this set of 10 books, and I'm now on book number 3. I feel like I've forgotten what was in book number 1. So, by the time I get to book number 11 or book number 10, how do I know what's really important? Not everything in the GMAT is of equal importance. Yet usually in the books, they're like chapters, right? Chapter about this and chapter about that. But some things are so much more important than some of the other things. These are the things that you want to focus on. Some of the skills, right? Like the skill, for example, of reading the question properly. It's so much more important than the skill of, solving a cubic equation, for example. Okay. Most of the GMAT books, so the GMAT books really, there are 2 categories of GMAT books. There's the official GMAT guide that's written by the people who make the test, which essentially includes questions from real past exams. And there are also strategy books that are written by test prep organizations that are used for 2 purposes. Purpose number 1, they're used for marketing. You go to a bookstore, you buy a book for $20, you try to read this book, and then you realize, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. And then, of course, this book is on your desk, and then you're looking at this book, and somewhere at the back of the book or maybe the front just saying, we also offer courses, so here's the website, right? And you go to this website and like, maybe I need a course, right? So that's what it's used for. And it's also some of these books are used in classes, right? We, for example, we at AdmitMaster do not publish books that you can buy in a bookstore. And there's actually a very specific reason why we don't do that. We could, but we don't. The reason why we don't do that, and we do a lot of marketing through these free classes. We have a lot of clients from referrals through different partner organizations, our clients. So a lot of our clients refer their friends to us. And we also work a lot with business schools who would be referring their potential candidates to us. We're going to say, well, look, there's somebody who we believe is a good candidate, but they need a good GMAT score. Right? So the reason why we don't publish books is that if we were, we would have to use simulated questions and not real questions in our books. Because every book you can buy in a bookstore that is not the official GMAT guide does not have real questions. I don't know if you knew that. And they all contain questions that were written by maybe a GMAT instructor or maybe by a writer. Typically spends about $10, $15 to write every single question, whereas the GMAT, just to give you a little bit of an idea of the economics of this, spends about $2,000 reading every single question. So that's why here at AdmitMaster, we do use real questions from past exams, and that's why we don't publish these books. Right? But if you come to our class, we are going to be in class using real questions from past exams. And so we chose a little bit of a different approach to marketing. We don't do it through books, but that allows us to use real questions in past exams. And we believe that that prepares you for the test a lot better. Of course, with the book, you can ask questions if something's unclear. The book won't really tell you what's important. And even if you ask ChatGPT very often, it will explain things from a more theoretical perspective and not necessarily from the skill. Like it might not necessarily give you the shortcut. And here's one more reason. And again, books do work for many people, but how many people read the books cover to cover? I have met so many people who said, I've had these books for, 3 months or a year, or, sometimes recently I had a student who said, I have a GMAT book. It was published in 2012. Do you think it's still relevant? Like, geez, that's been 13 years. I said, yeah, I bought this book 13 years ago. Like, oh, geez, so what have you been doing for 13 years, right? So that's a challenge because we need the structure, we need the motivation. So I'd like to encourage you to actually build the structure for yourself, or let us help you build that structure, because that is going to be really important, because that's what's going to help you see the result at the end. So when you're really thinking about how am I going to structure all of this, there are many different options that we offer here at AdmitMaster. And since you came to our class, we'd love for you to continue our journey with us. We really care very passionately about our students. So If you enjoyed this class, then you could potentially consider continuing with us. So here's what we've done so far. We had the refresher class today, and this is our online class. We did 4 or 5 questions. You will have access to the recording of this class, so please definitely refer back to it if you would like. Share it with your friends if you would like. If you would like to continue with us, there is a self-prep option that you can take advantage of that basically gives you access to recorded modules. You can have access to it for anywhere from 1 to 12 months, and the longer the access, the more resources you have. So we give you access to the recorded modules with every plan, but with a 6 months plan, for example, we also give you mock exams, and we give you more questions. Right? Whereas with a 1 month plan, we give you the strategies, but fewer questions to practice on. Just there's some technical limitations. And then you can also just say, look, I know this is a very big decision and it's an important journey in my life. So I would like to get the support that I need, because especially I know this is a very small investment right now for me to get something that's much bigger in my life. So in that case, you can come to our live class, which is what we call the all-inclusive GMAT mastery program, which essentially gives you live classes, whether in person or online. If you are in Toronto, then you can definitely join our class in person. We offer classes several times a week. I will actually show you just very quickly what the next starting dates are. So that includes live coaching, includes some one-on-one tutoring, and we give you all of the resources. So all of the practice questions, 9 mock exams, the personalized study plan that's made just for you. We see an average score improvement of approximately 200 points. We have seen people improve up to 400 points, and you're going to have access to everything for 12 months, unlimited. So many people are saying, oh, well, gee, live classes are so expensive. Well, I mean, everything is really something we can understand in a perspective. The self-prep programs at our school cost about $2 to $3 a day. And we're talking about Canadian dollars, right? Even if you look at some of the competing self-prep programs, some of them will be somewhere in the range of, maybe $7 to $10 a day. But even the live course, many people believe that the live course is very expensive. It is not. If you really break this down for everything that you have, turns out to be approximately the cup of coffee, right? So maybe you replace that cup of coffee, or maybe that second cup of coffee, with something that's going to help you change your life. And with the live course, we also include help with the application strategy. So we're going to guide you through the application strategy, as well as what's also very important is you're going to have access to the amazing network. Now, we're a class that's going on right now, and in that class, we have a person who's personal, one of the students, so his personal referee is the leader of the opposition party in Canada. Now, that's the person that he's personally working with. Another person who has personal closing line, right? Another person who is working for a very large news organization. That's an amazing network that you can start building, right? And you can meet people who are going to then go to different business schools, and they can become your network, right? Or maybe they can be very successful in their careers, and they can become your network. And this is an amazing network that you can leverage. Sometimes when we, very often at the end of the class, we ask people, what was the biggest takeaway from this class? They'll say, yeah, I learned many strategies, but it's the people who I've met here. That's what are really valued. So for you, ladies and gentlemen, since you came here and you stayed till the very end, we also have a very special offer. Until this Saturday, you can save $200 on any of our live classes. And also, if you choose the GMAT Express Self-Pro program, you can actually save 30% on that program as well. So it could be a cup of, simple Tim Hortons coffee. So I encourage you to try these out. And certainly if that is something that you would like to talk about a little bit more, then let me know. I'm happy to connect, and we'll follow up with you. And in fact, if you would like for me to reach out to you personally, then just let me know in a poll. But before we go, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you a couple of quick stories. The first story that I wanted to tell you is the story of one of our students. We met a few years ago, It was before the pandemic, and this person's name was Mo. And the story is very interesting. I'm telling you this story not just maybe to inspire you, but also maybe to share with you what are some of the steps that you can take also to make sure that you get your career to the next level. So here's what Mo said. He said, look, he came to our class and said, I have an accounting degree from Brock. Good accounting degree. He said, I was working as an auditor at Scotiabank. It's a good job. He had a CPA, but he feels like, I can't really do this for the rest of my life, right? I mean, it's interesting and yet it's boring at the same time. You're making good money, but you want to potentially do something else. So he said, I need to think ahead, so I need to do my MBA. And his goal was to apply to a part-time program, one of the local schools. Takes 3 to 4 years to finish his MBA while working for continuing to work for the bank. Okay. So when he came in, his initial goal was, I'm gonna get a score that's around average for a part-time program. It was about 600, and with that score, I'm gonna be able to apply, continue working, and everything is going to be fairly easy to manage. When he came to the class, I still remember him. We had a lot of fun in class. We always tried to do, to add a little bit of fun because it's a challenging experience. So it's nice to be around other people who are also having a good time. Hope you're having a good time today. We're almost done. It's kind of sad. And when he finished the class, started taking mock exams. And of course, when you finish our class, our journey together is not going to be over. We're going to give you mock exams, and we're going to continue staying in touch. And you can come back and retake classes, and we're going to do some private tutoring, and as well as coaching on the application. So Mo started taking mock exams and started seeing scores that were much higher than what he actually wanted to get. The first mock exam, he got a score around 700, whereas he only wanted about 600. So 3 weeks after the end of the course, he actually took a real test and got a score of 700. So I remember I actually called Mo and I was like, Mo, congratulations, this is amazing. We keep in touch with many of our students, send them an email. They send us an email saying, I'm taking my test, and we follow up. And is like, I just got 700. That's amazing. So what are you going to do with this score? He said, I'm going to retake my test. Like my jaw dropped on the floor. What do you mean? You wanted 600? Now you're saying 700 isn't good enough? He said, yeah, I think I can do better. Oh my gosh. Okay, that's good. That's a good attitude. So let's talk about what you might need to get a better score. So we sat down and developed a strategy. So a month later, he got a score of 730. So just to give you an idea, 700 is the top 10%. 730 is the top 4%, right? So it's quite difficult to get from 700 to 730. But once he got there, we sat down again and he's like, okay, Sergey, now I'm really ready to talk about what can I do with this amazing score. So can you help me understand what can I do with this amazing score? And I'm like, let's talk about what do you really want to do? Let's dream big, right? So what do you want to do, Mo? He said, well, look, I thought I want to continue working for a bank, but I don't feel like that's really what I want to do. So if I had an option, here's what I want to do, right? And he shared specifically, for him, it was actually 2016 at that time, right? So at that time, it's like, I want to go to China. I mean, it's growing so fast, and it's just double-digit growth, and the technology is just growing like crazy. So I want to do this, and I said, okay, so what's plan B? Okay, well, I'm not sure that's plan B, but I would love to work in management consulting. So that's amazing. I started talking to my friends in class, and everybody was saying, well, I want to go to Harvard or maybe this school in the US, and I want to do management consulting. Then I started doing more research, and I'm like, wow, I would love that. I would love working in management consulting. I said, okay, well, let's see what might potentially help you get there. So we started, he started working with one of our admissions consultants who used to be a director of admissions at one of the top tier schools. So we have a team of admissions consultants. These are people who actually were sitting in the admissions committee. So he worked with one of them, and they essentially started narrowing down the list of schools. And the list of school for Mo boiled down to actually 2 schools that are going to help him get where he wants to go. One of them was the school name called INSEAD, which at that time was ranked #1 in the world. Now it's ranked #2 and #3. So a very highly ranked school. And specifically, he was interested in a campus in Singapore, which is very close to Asia. And the school is a big feeder into management consulting firms. And the second school that he actually decided to apply to was China Europe International Business School, CEIBS. This is a school with campuses in Switzerland and in Shanghai. And he actually, and that's the school that was ranked #5 in the world at that time. So also a very highly ranked, prestigious school. So he, with the help of a consultant, he was able to build a strong story. And with his GMAT score specifically, he was able to get into both of these schools. Now, at that point, he had the decision to make. CEIBS offered him a scholarship, which was, fairly significant at that time. Just considering everything and considering that he wanted to be in China and considering that he had no experience in management consulting before, he's just, you know what, my chance of getting into management consulting, something like McKinsey, is not very high. So I'm going to go and choose CEIBS. So long story short, 2 years later, I'm opening my LinkedIn and Mo just got a new job. I'm opening, like, what's Mo doing? Well, lo and behold, Mo got a job with McKinsey, which is, of course, one of the top 3 management consulting firms in the world. So I got in touch with Mo immediately. We had a quick, nice, friendly chat. He told me about how he was able to get there. There was so much support in this top-tier business school for management consulting. It's a school that's so small, about 150 people for 1.5 billion people in China. You can imagine how selective is the school, right? And by the way, he's from Canada, even though he was of Chinese origin, but he wasn't speaking Mandarin fluently at that time, and the school is offered actually in English. So that was his personal journey. So he's still in China. He is now a manager at McKinsey, and he just completely loves it. In fact, we had people come from CEIBS to us, to our office in Toronto, just saying, we heard so much about you, and we'd love to do some work together. So we did some seminars, we did some training for people who are applying to CEIBS as well. Right, so ladies and gentlemen, you can change your life. And this could be a life-changing experience. All you need to do is just really start making the right decisions for yourself. Maybe the first decision is, what school do I want to go to, or what score do I want to get? Right? Maybe do more research. Maybe reach out for one-on-one consultation. I'd love to help you. And if you decide that a high score is going to help you get to where you want to go, then come and join us. The average score of our students is in the 80th percentile. I wish it were higher. Of course, we do have people from all walks of life, and sometimes all they need is, 550. We do have also about a third of our students who get scored in the top 10%. This is actually very impressive. Because I remember we hired an instructor, actually, who used to work for one of the large companies. I'm not going to tell you the name of the company, but he works for a very large company that publishes books. He worked there for 5 years. So he came to us, and he taught his first course. And then he came to me a few months later and said, Sergey, this is very strange. He said, I had more people get scores of 700 or more in one course that I got in my entire 5-year career. I said, something's going on there. So that person actually was teaching for us for a very long time, and you might see him on some of the videos. So the idea, ladies and gentlemen, really here at Admit Master, our goal is to help you. We work for you. We help you get to where you want to go. And we understand and really value that you're making this investment. We understand that this is a very important investment. That's why we're very passionate about helping you. Our goal would be to increase the money that you invest for GMAT preparation. And the average scholarship that our students get when they actually get into the business schools, and the majority of them do get into their top choice business schools, is about $30,000. So they basically give it, 10, 15, sometimes 20 times to what they paid for the GMAT course. And that's really one of the best returns on investment that you can get. Right, so we are very passionate about this. I have my own MBA. I understand return on investment, and trust me that I continue being very engaged with the MBA community as well. So if you'd like to join us, our next evening class starts on June 3rd. Oh, wait, I mean, today's June 5th. So yes, you could still join that class. We are going to give you class recordings. for the class that happened on Tuesday and today, but you can jump into this class. We still have 5 more weeks to go. We're going to give you all the resources, all the materials, and we are going to help you catch up, so don't worry. But our classes, our live classes, come with unlimited 12 months access to the classes, right? So it's not like just come to the class, you leave the class, and then we never want to talk to you. No, that's not Admit Master. You are welcome to come back to the class if you would like. So our next evening class starts on July 22nd, and we're going to have another class in September. So these are the classes on Tuesday and Thursday nights. They start at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and they go until 9:30. Our weekend classes, our next weekend classes on September 6th. So we're not going to have classes on weekends until September. Let everybody enjoy the summer. And then we're going to have a couple of more classes before the end of the year. Right, so weekend class is also very enjoyable if you can wait a little bit more than Saturday, Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can take our weekend class. Of course, there are other options, the self-study options. So please go on our website, admitmaster.com/offer, and explore the different options. Sign up for the Master Refresher class that's going to be on June 19th, 2 weeks from now, unless you have done so already. Take a practice test if you would like. Just go to trygmat.com. And remember that if you sign up by Saturday, you'll be able to save $200 on any of our live classes and 30% on the self-study program. So we want to reward people who are taking action, because people who are, they succeed. And that's what we know. So we are very committed to your results if you are committed to your results. Wow. We've spent these 2 hours together. I really enjoyed spending this time with you this evening. I know that this is maybe a little bit of a scary journey. I got to go to school right now, and I haven't been out of school for some time, and I got to spend all this time and money going to school. But, I just talk to people who have an MBA and ask them what they've gotten out of it. I highly encourage you to do your research and actually connect with different schools. We're going to have different events as well. On July 12th, we're going to be in New York, and then there are going to be multiple events around Eastern United States and Eastern Canada where we can meet in person again. We do have an office in Toronto, so please reach out, come over. We can make an appointment, sign up for a one-on-one consultation so we can talk a little bit more. I can give you some pointers so that you can decide whether this is the right step for you. And if it is, you owe it to yourself to start moving towards your goals. And if it's not, that's fine. There are many other ways to contribute to our life. So maybe you can start pursuing some other ways. Right? So our goal is to really help you get to that goal, because, I like to say this, and I'm going to say it again right now. Business schools are designed to prepare leaders in business, leaders in not-for-profit organization, and even leaders in public sector. And boy, does the world need good leaders. I think there's a bit of a lack of leadership that we have been feeling, not everywhere, but certainly in some pockets of our world. So if you feel that you have what it takes to make the world a better place, let's just be honest. You can get rewarded very handsomely for doing that. Maybe taking a small part of helping a company grow, or maybe taking a big part by, doing something bigger, or maybe starting a new company that's going to change the experience of a lot of people. If you're that kind of person, then you definitely owe it not just to yourself, but to other people as well. So live your dreams, ladies and gentlemen, and let's help build future leaders. Take care, and thanks again for joining today. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Let's connect. I will send you an email tomorrow morning. So please just respond back to that email. And if you'd like to chat, just let me know. You can connect with me on WhatsApp as well. I will include my WhatsApp number in the follow-up email. And actually, right now, what I'm going to do is I will send you a link to the website where you can find all of that. There. admitmaster.com/offer. So it's admitmaster.com/offer. This is a special page we've set up just for you so that you can have access to the things that other people, perhaps who didn't come here today, don't necessarily do. Thanks again. And I look forward to seeing you in class or speaking with you soon. Take care and all the best.